Well, we can discuss this with our guests. Joining me from Tel Aviv is Alon Pinkas, former Israeli diplomat, and in York in the UK is Sultan Barakat, a professor of public policy at Hamad bin Khalifa University. Sultan, I'm going to start with you because this is being painted as some kind of humanitarian city. I believe that's the words being used. But forcibly moving people into a tiny area, 60,000 of them, controlling access in and out, possibly not letting people leave once they've entered, having these secure checkpoints. This sounds an awful lot like a concentration camp.
Of course it is. It's what Gaza has been since 2007. But this time is going to shrink the area into a very small area, and will be surrounded by Israeli occupation forces, and will maintain the same restrictions. Ultimately, the aim is to get people to choose to leave. And this is what Netanyahu referred to yesterday as their almost right freedom of choice. The Palestinians should be allowed this freedom of choice and should not be imprisoned in Gaza in the days to come. So he's already made life impossible in Gaza. He's uprooted the population from original homes. There is no infrastructure to speak of. So it's only logical that if the world were to open the gates on the basis of a humanitarian response, people will probably leave Gaza.
Sultan, just picking up there on that phrase, freedom of choice, how much freedom is there in that choice?
Well, given the last 2 years and the conditions he's created for them, Israel created for the Palestinians, there is no choice. I mean, it's normal that people, when they put into this situation, they will opt to live. And if living is a possibility, then they will go for it. Having said that, of course, it's not going to end the spirit of resistance. And you can see until this morning that Israel has suffered a serious casualty, 5 soldiers killed. This comes on the back of 7 soldiers that were killed some 2 weeks ago. Mm-hmm. And the Palestinians are not using, a highly sophisticated weaponry or anything. Israel has destroyed all that infrastructure. They're actually taking the bombs into the tanks. So they're not going to stop. And as long as the Israelis are in Gaza, they have to suffer the consequences. So this comes at a very interesting, very critical time, I think, in relation to the negotiations with the Israelis, and particularly adding pressure on Netanyahu, because if you notice in the last 2 weeks, his own military commanders were saying that we are not achieving much more against Hamas by being in Gaza. We're exposing ourselves further to their retaliation. And if the news that we hear is correct, that these particular 5 soldiers that were killed belong to the ultra-Orthodox unit, who were forced made to join the military by Netanyahu only a few months ago, then I think it's a double pressure on Netanyahu at the moment. So the logical thing would be for him to reach an end to this war, hopefully in Washington over the coming few days, without pushing the idea of displacing the Palestinians out. Otherwise, there is no end to this.
Well, Alon, just picking up on that, how is this plan, this forced transfer plan, going over in Israel? How are people receiving it?
Look, by and large, people are less tuned to all these utterances from the defense minister, because he comes up with some statement every 2 days and nothing happens with it. If you ask the average Israeli, would he like for this to go away, for the Palestinians to go away, for Gaza to disappear? Yeah, but people are also realistic, and they know that's not going to happen. But there's a more important thing here, putting aside, the moral dimension, the moral depravity of it, of clustering 2.3 million people, or even 1.5 million, in some kind of an internment camp. And that is that if this becomes official policy, which it has not, if this becomes practical policy, which I think is unfeasible, then this whole negotiation process is an exercise in futility, because If we're looking at 60 days, after which Israel will unilaterally and gradually withdraw or redeploy in Gaza, then this is inconsistent with this plan. If the idea is that during that 60-day ceasefire period and partial exchange of hostages for Palestinian prisoners, if that is the case, and during that period, negotiations on a post-war Gaza political framework are to be held, then this is completely irreconcilable with this plan. So either this plan is complete and utter nonsense and political rhetoric and hollow statements, or it indicates that Israel has no plans for a post-war Gaza. And in fact, this plan, even if it's not implemented the way it was presented, if this plan is even launched, that's the end of any kind of negotiation on a post-war Gaza. So we're looking at a very, very bleak future here.
Alon, we know that there's been much discussion about the forced displacement of Palestinians beyond Gaza's borders. We're hearing that now in Washington, D.C. We've heard that from President Trump at points. We've heard that from Netanyahu many times. Could this potentially be a plan that lays the groundwork for trying to argue that there's some kind of voluntary dimension to then really force Palestinians out of Gaza? Here's your option. Here's the concentration camp, or get out.
Conceivably, yes. Practically, no. Why am I saying this? Because conceivably, Israel could present that choice. And indeed, as you mentioned correctly, Prime Minister Netanyahu mumbled something about, well, they have a choice to leave or stay. It's their right, he said. He's the champion of human rights now. But if we look at it practically, where are they going to go? Japan, Sweden, Argentina, where are they going to go? Who's going to pay for their relocation? Which country agreed to take them? The entire world is engulfed with anti-migrant and anti-immigration and anti-foreigner sentiment. So where exactly are they going to go? This doesn't make sense, and not for the first time, Israel is flirting with ideas that don't make sense. All that being said and done, prolonging the war was a political decision made by Netanyahu, and it was unnecessary and unwarranted. But the war and the destruction of Gaza was brought about by Hamas, not by Israel. Let's not forget that. It all started on October 7, 2023, and it would be wrong to put the entire blame. Yes, it's devastated. Yes, it's been reduced to rubble. Yes, it was wrong of Israel in terms of the exorbitant use of force and the protraction of the war. But no, this war was not unprovoked. This is not some idea that Israel devised overnight to get rid of Gaza. That is not the case.
I can see that you have some strong feelings about that, Sultan. Let me let you respond there.
Well, I think it's very clear what Israel's plan has been, not just from 7th of October, but way beyond that. And we all understand what they're planning for the West Bank, their excursions into the West Bank, the settlement, etc. So I think it would be naive to think that Israel does not plan long-term and lots of episodes and create all sorts of instability outside Israel and inside to achieve its objective. This has been the history, and there's a lot of evidence for this. I mean, we're living in extremely ironic days, really. I mean, to have Netanyahu yesterday presenting Trump with a nomination for the Nobel Prize. Can you imagine this? A man who is wanted by the International Criminal Court on accusations of genocide and war crimes is nominating his key partner for the Nobel Prize. And the real sad thinking is that the whole world is falling all over itself trying to please the United States at the moment, partly because of the economic pressure, because of their security force, etc. So it's not inconceivable that countries will come up on the basis of humanitarian responses and take Palestinian refugees. I mean, they've done it before with the Afghans. They removed Afghans out of Afghanistan and dispersed them around the world to their ally countries. It's all possible. The risk, I think, and the real issue here is it's not going to make Israel any safer or more secure. It's just postponing the problem for another generation to be tackled. If there is to be a mass displacement of the Gazans into Egypt, then those people will benefit from 100 million base of 100 million supporters and more in Egypt. They will be much better connected, much better ability to resupply, and they will come back to demand their rights. And the same if they were to push the Palestinians from West Bank into Jordan. So the real issue is not about these tactical gains, which Netanyahu obviously is using extremely cleverly to maintain his extreme fragile government and manipulating not just Trump, I think the whole American base back in the United States. It's not going to resolve any of the issues that Israel aspires for, and that is to be a good neighbor in the Middle East. And for it to be a good neighbor, it has to behave like a state within the confinement of the international law, within the what is expected of all other neighbors. Otherwise, it's not going to ever end.
Sultan Barakat there, a professor of public policy at Hamad bin Khalifa University, and Alon Pinkas, a former Israeli diplomat. Thank you, gentlemen, very much for joining us here on the Al Jazeera NewsHour.